He's a drummer who loses his hearing. It's a movie, The Sound of Metal, released in late 2020. Is this movie any good? Should you watch it? Let me answer that coming up next. Sound of Metal stars Riz Ahmed and directed by Darius Marder. Here you have a man, a drummer, who is, well, he loses his hearing. He wakes up one day. He can't hear hardly anything. The doctor tells him he's down to 20 to 30% in both ears. And of course, as a professional drummer, well, that is just death to your career. And so he struggles with this onset of deafness. Character's name is Ruben Stone, and he has a girlfriend who he's going around the United States with in an Airstream. They have a tour, they have a band, and when his deafness comes, he is angry and frustrated, as you might imagine. The two drive to a home for deaf people. Here they're called deaf. We might say hearing impaired, but I think the word impairment, as this movie shows, is not good enough. The movie will show you what it's like and actually sound, hopefully, reasonably close to what it's like to lose a lot of your hearing, to be deaf, and to be very frustrated at the sudden onset of major hearing loss. Ruben is a former addict, 4 years clean. When he's asked what drugs he took, he says everything, mainly heroin. You know he's struggling with that. You know he's struggling then with the new normal. And this is a new normal movie where a character wakes up. The world, their world, is completely different. They have to adjust, but maybe there's no adjusting for Ruben to the hearing loss. At this home, he learns to do sign language. He learns to live with his deafness or near deafness, supposedly. But the problem is he just can't sit still. He's told by the man who runs the house, go into the room in the morning, a open, quiet room, sit down, and if you can sit still, great. But if you can't, free write. Start writing whatever you want. And Ruben really, in the middle of the movie, tries this, but never really accomplishes this task. And thus you have a character who at once is adjusting to hearing loss, but is not at all. The movie's major strength, and I think it may have no other strengths besides this, is to simulate what it would be like to have onset of sudden hearing loss. And then in the early stages of that, particularly when a person does not know sign language and is not adjusted, whatever that means, to the hearing loss, what it would be like to have that happen to you. The movie uses handheld cameras and especially sound and sound effects at times in this movie to simulate what it would be like to hear as Ruben hears the world around him. And let me tell you, it would be very devastating. I think the movie does great work. I am sure there is a few problems with the way this movie simulates hearing loss, and yet it really strikes me as, first of all, I would never want to lose my hearing. Second, I have a lot more empathy just from watching this movie for those who are hearing impaired, have lost their hearing, who are deaf, and it just makes you feel for these people. So following Ruben around and seeing what he deals with, I think is just great. I think the simulation of hearing loss in this movie, you really get on the inside as best you can of somebody who's lost their hearing. The question for Ruben is, can this problem be fixed? And one of the answers is yes, it can be fixed through technology, through hearing implants. But the other character who runs the house for the deaf people, he says you can't fix this. In fact, there's no fixing. There's no such thing as impairment. Deafness just is a state of being, and you need to learn to be still and to find stillness. And this is an actual quote from the movie, to find stillness where you can just sit and be as you are, hearing impaired, means it's the kingdom of God for you. But Ruben struggles with that. He can't even figure out what that means. And so he's always got this thing he wants, which is to hear, obviously to play music, but just to hear as he used to. And so you have a technology versus dealing with hearing loss in this movie. You have implants on the one hand as possibly a solution for Ruben, but also he could stay at this home, learn to have a terrible hearing impairment, learn to live with what he's lost, and be a normal, as best he can, person, and to be a new normal kind of person. You've probably seen several new normal movies where a character has a sudden, impairment, injury, loss, or they'll have someone who dies in the family, a close friend, a spouse, something like that, a child. This movie feels like it has all those notes, and so it will seem conventional to people, and I dare say a lot of people watching this movie will find it to be ordinary, relatively clear, and the path forward, that is the path towards the end, probably is somewhat predictable. At the same time, I feel like this movie is very clever in its use of both handheld camera shots to be up in Ruben's face, even to be sort of a first-person perspective on his hearing loss, but also these stable long shots are thrown in at several points to show that we are actually the audience, and I think this is wise, quite distant from those who are hearing impaired or deaf. Those of us who can hear quite well, we don't really know what it's like. And so this mix of, I think we can know and be empathetic with them and be in them and understand them with the handheld shots, but we're at the same time very distant from these people, I think is pretty wise on the part of the movie. And to show this, split between technology solving perhaps the hearing impairment problem that Ruben has, versus he could, be at the home and work there and be amongst new friends, but have to deal with hearing loss and never hear again as he did. I think that, division and that tension is pretty wise in the movie too. And the truth is, even though Ruben can make sounds, as a professional drummer, that's what he does, and the movie is about him trying to hear sounds, the truth is that Ruben never really has the right words. In fact, the words never come to him. It seems he can't talk to people. He can't tell them the truth. He can't write down, when he's told to free write. He just can't do it very well. And so these kinds of things about not having the language, not having the words, is really interesting. And it sneaks up on you in this movie. Perhaps some of you didn't even notice it because it's not, put into your face. But Ruben is unable to say the right words, and I think you should look for that in this movie. So for that reason, I think this movie is probably better than ordinary, new normal, impairment loss sorts of movies, and I'm going to give it 3.5 stars. I would probably watch this again to study it, especially to study the way it uses sound and sound effects. So get out your best speakers or headphones for this, because it's worth hearing the way Ruben hears, both before and after the hearing loss. And the movie does, as I said, a great job simulating that. And as we all do, we need noise to fill the spaces in our lives. Wherever you go, at least in America in modern life, airports, restaurants, grocery stores, there is white noise everywhere. This has been a phenomenon observed for decades now. We have to hear things. Our air, our spaces are surrounded with noise. Can we ever sit in stillness and in silence? And that, in fact, is a major dilemma for Ruben, who is not unlike us people, and that, I'm just saying a lot of people, and I would include myself. We need sound to fill the silences, because if you sit in utter silence, it's scary, it's annoying, it's very hard to sit without hearing something. And so for that reason, I think this movie is not just talking about a rock drummer who used to be a heroin addict, and maybe you can't identify with this person. I think you ought to, because a lot of us are like that. So this is quite a good movie as far as a diagnosis of some of our problems of not being able to sit in silence in the stillful way. What do you think about this movie? What do you think about what I said? Please let us know in the comments. And please subscribe to this channel for more great reviews, movie content, movie education. Thank you. Have a great day.